From fitness routines to mental resilience, navigating personal goals to tackling burnout, we could all use a little help being human. And that is what the Life Kit podcast from NPR is here to do. As I'm sure you've noticed, life does not come with a manual, but you still have to make choices every day, some big, some small, and these shape the direction of your life. Well, Life Kit delivers strategies to help you make meaningful, sustainable change. I personally am still in summer mode over here, and lately Life Kit has been really delivering with advice on how to improve your grilling or make a salad for your next picnic, how to beat the heat on a humid day. Ice towels, people, ice towels, they really make a huge difference. But of course, even when you are in summer mode, life still presents much thornier issues, and Life Kit has recently done episodes on preparing your home for possible flooding, staying out of credit card debt, making hard decisions together with your spouse. I promise, if you go to the Life Kit feed and take a scroll through the topics, you will find something that will help with a dilemma in your life. So go ahead and check it out. Listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR. Hey there, Jody here from This Day headquarters. We are taking our usual late summer break, so for the next couple weeks we are bringing you some favorites from the archives. Maybe you've heard them before, maybe you haven't. Either way, we think these are worth spending some time with, and thanks to everyone who subscribes to our newsletter who helped vote on which episodes to rerun. This is a gentle reminder to subscribe to the newsletter. Also spread the word about the show to someone, leave a review, get in touch with an idea for an episode at thisdaypod.com, and most importantly, enjoy the last few weeks of summer. All right, here we go.
Communication is critical to your success in your personal and professional life. I'm Matt Abrahams, and I teach strategic communication at Stanford Graduate School of Business, and I host Think Fast, Talk Smart, the podcast. I sit down with experts to discuss actionable advice that you can immediately apply to your life. We cover topics like managing communication anxiety, speaking better in the moment, maximizing your influence, and how to negotiate to get what you want and need. Listen wherever you get your podcasts to level up your communication.
As summer winds down, I'm all about refreshing my wardrobe with staple pieces for the season ahead. And Quince nails it with luxe essentials that feel effortless and look polished, perfect for layering and mixing. I recently went and picked out a couple pairs of slacks, a light jacket, because you know that crisp fall air will be here before we know it. And then I was looking around the Quince website and I noticed a section I hadn't seen before: kids. I'm not sure if this applies to you, but oh my gosh, my kid is going back to school soon. And not only that, they grew over the summer. That always kind of sneaks up on me. Well, luckily, Quince has stylish and affordable kids' clothes, so I quickly snagged a linen overshirt, a pair of kids' jeans, and even some new running pants. They also have kids' backpacks, by the way, just a tip. So, whether for you or whoever, elevate your fall wardrobe essentials with Quince. Go to quince.com/thisday for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/thisday to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, August 19th, 1791, Benjamin Banneker sent a draft of an almanac that he was working on to Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was, of course, a founding father, but also a scientist, scientifically minded, so I suppose Banneker felt it would be a nice move to send him an advance copy of the almanac he was drafting. Everyone likes advance copies of interesting work. But the almanac isn't really the key element here. It is the letter that Banneker included alongside the almanac that we are here to discuss, a plea to Jefferson that he uphold the values of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and declare slavery immoral. As Banneker wrote to Jefferson, quote, "However variable we may be in society or religion, however diversified in situation or color, we are all of the same family and stand in the same relation to Him, God." So, here to discuss Banneker's letter, his appeal to Jefferson, his enlightenment-era appeal to Jefferson, and this question we kind of keep circling around on this podcast of the Constitution and the question of slavery. To discuss that all, as always, are Nicole Hemmer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody. Hey there.
Kellie, maybe I guess this is the first time we've talked about Benjamin Banneker on this podcast, so why not a little Benjamin Banneker bio? Who was this interesting almanac writer? What do we need to know about him?
Sure. So Benjamin Banneker, I actually got introduced to him during Black History Month, which is where you get those, did you know? He always pops up as one of those people because he's considered the first African-American scientist, the first African-American civil engineer. He's born a free person. He is brilliant, self-taught, a farmer, a mathematician, an astronomer. He helps to plan what becomes Washington, D.C., and he's beloved, not just in the Black community, but highly respected among his white peers as well. And so he has this opportunity to be in conversation with Thomas Jefferson, and he takes it a step further. He doesn't just use it as an opportunity to say, hey, look at this almanac I made, but to really pitch him on this idea of equality, which he sees himself, or he sees Thomas Jefferson as really laying that, language in the Declaration of Independence and basically challenging him to live up to that creed.
First off, let me say, I nominate you to write the little Black History Month "Did you know" things from now on. That was lovely.
Deal.
Yeah, I don't know.
I love him.
but also, I want to linger on one specific thing there, which is you said Banneker was born a free person. I mean, how rare is that in this year? And especially, he was born in Maryland. Just put that in context.
Oh, man.
He was born in 1731. How rare is it for, Black
It's
person
extremely rare, extremely rare, given that, considering in a period where 750,000 Black people were enslaved. So there are very small pockets of free people living and moving in Maryland. And as we get later into, the 19th century, these laws will change and free Black people won't even be allowed within Maryland. So the fact that he occupies this space is very, very rare.
And that I think he eventually moves to Philadelphia and is part of this scientific and intellectual community in a way that, probably in 1831 wouldn't be possible. So in a way, he is the product of this moment in U.S. history when it's pre-U.S., and when there are opportunities for free Black people that would close as slavery became more codified and anti-Blackness became more codified in U.S. law and culture.
Okay, let's turn a little bit to this letter that he includes. So first off, I guess, give us context for why it is that Banneker feels like he can send a letter to Thomas Jefferson, and why Thomas Jefferson will open and read a letter from Benjamin Banneker. I mean, he does seem to have the ear of elites, right?
Well, Thomas Jefferson becomes one of the founding fathers of this country, but also, he's known for writing the Declaration of Independence. But even more than that, I think are his notes on the state of Virginia, to me, I think are some of the most provocative writing. And in those notes, he talks about Black people as being biologically inferior, of being physically and intellectually inferior to that of whites. And so this rationale that he comes with, like, Banneker balks at this entire idea, especially considering that when you think of the role that enslaved people played, many of the interventions and inventions that took place were created at the helm of enslaved people. Like, enslaved people were doing this work. And so he's writing this letter to push back on these ideas that Black people are intellectually and physically inferior. And in his mind, it just doesn't make sense, given that so much of the country is dependent upon enslaved labor.
And Banneker is like exhibit A of this, right? He is one of, as Kellie was saying earlier, one of the few Black people in what would become the U.S. who hasn't had the yoke of slavery, who's had the opportunity to have an education. And what happened? It turns out that he's a brilliant scientist and is able to thrive without those restraints put on his person and his opportunities. And so he's writing to Jefferson sort of as like look at me, like I'm proof that you're wrong in Notes of the State of Virginia. And as someone who puts himself out there as a man of the Enlightenment, who observes the world and learns from it rather than coming into it with these preconceived notions, right? That's the Enlightenment ideal. You should be able to look at this evidence and say, oh, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Spoiler, that's not what happens.
We'll get into that in a second, but to linger a little bit on the kind of appeal that he was making, just because we've talked on this podcast a number of times about the different kinds of abolitionist appeals, the evolution, the ebbs and flows, and a lot of it related to the Constitution, which, as we've pointed out a number of times, doesn't explicitly address slavery, but people either have seen interpretations or seen a lack of interpretations. And like, as I said, there's this ebb and flow of looking to the Constitution for salvation or or rejecting the Constitution outright to make abolitionist arguments. So in this particular moment, it appears that Banneker, and certainly I guess he's writing to a drafter of the Constitution, is really trying to say in this document are some core principles that you can align with this Enlightenment worldview that make a strong case against slavery.
And that you're a hypocrite, like the short of it is
that's a much better way to phrase it.
Like these but this is I want to sort of tease this out a little bit because I think it's important. There are a lot of people who believed in the abolition of slavery that did not believe that Black people were equal to white people. Right. So abolition and equality are not the same thing at all. So it would make sense that Banneker could appeal to the demise of the institution of slavery, but also appeal to the equality of the races, which I think should be at the forefront of this. Because if you believe that Black people are equal to white people, then subsequently you can believe that slavery is wrong. But you can believe that slavery is wrong and not necessarily believe that Black people are equal. And that is where Thomas Jefferson sort of lies in that conundrum.
Yeah, and just to linger on the abolitionist point here, I think it's also important to highlight what Banneker is doing. He is making an argument for equality and for abolition in the moment. I mean, people often say, well, you can't criticize Thomas Jefferson because he was a man of his time. And it was people who later came along and were like, slavery is wrong and Black people are equal. Well, here you have a contemporary letter where a Black person is writing to Thomas Jefferson making these arguments and was part of an abolitionist movement that was already in existence in the United States. So it is not true that Thomas Jefferson wasn't exposed to these arguments and that these values weren't circulating in the U.S. at the time.
Right. And among certainly Black people, but also white Americans too, as
right.
We'll see, this really had a big impact galvanizing an abolitionist movement. But let's talk about Jefferson's reaction specifically. So I suppose I should ask somewhat naively, what would Jefferson's ideal reaction be? And moreover, what would be the actual impact of that? If Jefferson were persuaded by this letter and were then to write a letter of his own or something, in 1791, what would be the impact of that?
I mean, the impact would be huge because it would mean that Jefferson would have to face really all of the economic implications that slave labor and slave property brought to him. And so if he were to read this letter and say, you know what, I'm freeing my slaves. Well, Jefferson owns hundreds of slaves. Like he is the most wealthiest, prosperous slave owner around, probably the wealthiest president, I believe. So he would have to address all of that. It would mean a forfeiture of a good portion of his wealth, if not all of his wealth. It would mean that he would have to sort of be honest and have a reckoning about these ideas and how he sees himself as a slaveholder. And you can't reconcile being a slaveholder and equality and abolition in the same breath.
And it would have made him too radical to ever have been elected president of the United States. There wouldn't be a President Thomas Jefferson if he embraced these ideas, I don't think.
No.
So, the response from Jefferson. This is a little flip, but it seems to be like Jefferson's response is essentially like, hey, I really liked that almanac. and then,
thanks.
Thanks for the almanac. But, let's you actually know more about the response. Give us a sense of what Jefferson does in response to this letter.
So Jefferson gives a really polite response. He does, acknowledge receipt of the almanac and sort of in a very proper way say thank you. But he really he still is living a life of contradiction and hypocrisy. So on one hand, he acknowledges, hey, you know what? This guy's pretty smart. This guy is onto something. This guy is a credit to his race. You know, he is the real deal. But he cannot bring himself to like acknowledge that publicly, to really go out and say, yes, you are in fact right. And so he just sort of dismisses it and doesn't really go much further.
And we should note later on down the line, he actually revises his opinion of Banneker and says, you know, there's no way that he could have done all of this work by himself. He must have had somebody to assist him. So over time, Jefferson sort of folds Banneker into his pre-existing ideas about Black inferiority. It's notable that it takes time for him to sort of evolve into that position, but it's an important part of his assessment of Banneker.
But that's essential, because if he were to recognize the truth that Banneker was saying to him, he could not exist as politically or economically or even socially in the world in which he was operating.
And this is something that we should know. Jefferson didn't need Banneker for this kind of exposure to talented, scientific-minded Black people, even enslaved Black people, right? He talks about it being a condition of their enslavement, their inferiority. But Jefferson worked alongside skilled Black laborers that he enslaved. So he was exposed to Black people who helped him with his own scientific work, who helped him with the work that he was doing at Monticello. And of course, he was exposed to the breadth of Black humanity as well. But he had spent a lifetime sort of reinterpreting that. So Banneker wasn't the first Black person he did that to.
This, of course, is not just a private correspondence. This has a much bigger impact beyond that, in part because the letter and Jefferson's response does get published and circulated in Philadelphia not that much later, and it really becomes a galvanizing document in what is a growing abolitionist movement. People really latch on to this correspondence. Kellie, what is this? What is the sort of milieu, and maybe in Philadelphia specifically, into which this correspondence lands?
I mean, I think this correspondence becomes something that I've even taught in my classes, to show the private and even the public understanding of American hypocrisy, that our founding fathers were not unaware of what they were doing. They were not sort of like moving unintentionally politically or economically, that they were aware, in some cases hyper aware, almost paranoid of the potential of African Americans and what they could accomplish. And that, a lot of these letters or correspondences show that like there's a major move to suppress Black contributions and Black pushback about Black humanity. So, it's to me, it's such a credit to Banneker that we even have this. But also it's such a stain on Thomas Jefferson that we see his really blatant dismissal and denial of someone like Benjamin Banneker.
As we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to talk about the sort of, the publishing strategy here that Banneker takes out. I mean, very, very smart and skillful person, as we've been discussing on a lot of fronts. But I also, the strategy of sneaking this letter into an almanac, which he knew that Thomas Jefferson would be interested in. But then when he publishes the almanac a couple years later, he includes this correspondence and, includes other letters that tie into the growing abolitionist movement. I just like it as a publishing strategy that, you take something that's mass market that everyone wants and needs, an almanac, and then you just sneak in a little bit of morality and politics in the preface when no one's looking.
Yeah, the almanac is an anti-slavery tract, which in Banneker's hands, it kind of was. And what that means for its circulation afterwards, because again, 1791 is not 1831. And the circulation of those ideas, particularly in the South, would look very different in a later period.
It's like if we went to weather.com and then like I popped up and said, like, here's a little bell hooks before we tell you when it's going to rain in Brooklyn.
Honestly, I would sign up for that website.
I'd do it. I'd buy in.
Really put the underground in the weather underground.
I know, right?
You know, Benjamin Banneker actually did a lot of other things. He was this inventor and a scientist, and he was writing this almanac, yes, but he also, he studied cicadas. So people have been talking about cicadas a lot lately because of their recent return. He was the one who figured out their return cycle, like that they would come back every 17 years, and also helped to differentiate them from locusts. And as you can imagine, people in the early to mid 18th century were worried about locusts destroying all of their crops.
Yeah, another cool fact is that he creates or invents a clock that he made all out of wood. And that clock kept the exact time for the next 40 years, which is pretty impressive if you think about a clock made out of entirely wood and one that can keep precise time as well.
To do that without metal, I don't even know that we could do that today. That's amazing.
Yeah, I have no idea. For 40 years, it's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
Can I just say
Yeah, please.
Dang those fires, because we've talked about fires before and how they wreak havoc, and because of a fire that happened the day on Benjamin Banneker's funeral, so many of his papers and his belongings were destroyed. There's only a handful left of some of his documents and journals, but I can't imagine what it would have been like to go through Benjamin Banneker's library or to look through his files and to see all of his ideas and musings about the moment in which he lived. Much of that is lost to history.
If you have a time machine, you're going directly to that moment and you're putting out that fire.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, let's leave it there. Nicole Hammer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, listener-supported, artist-owned podcasts. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. You can get in touch with us with any questions or comments or ideas for the show. Email us thisdaypod@gmail.com, or you can find a form at thisdaypod.com. My name is Jody Avirgan. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Radiotopia.